Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Matt Rhule, Nebraska, playing host to Michigan Saturday afternoon in what I feel like is comfortably the biggest game in the Matt Rhule era. And the reason I choose to say that is that this is the kind of football game that Nebraska brought in Matt Rhule for. And they knew it was going to take some time. Like they knew Matt Rhule had a certain way he wants to build a program, and they gave him the first 2 years to build this thing the right way. And I think there's a lot of internal optimism that going into 2025, going into this football game, we have the roster that we can go out and win this kind of game on this kind of stage. And it's an opportunity for Nebraska to show not only the fan base, but the college football landscape that this program in 2025 is a legitimate college football playoff contender. Like, no longer are we talking about Nebraska scratching and crawling to make a bowl game. This is a program that I think has I think has the roster to go out and make a run at the college football playoffs, but it starts with this game at home against Michigan. You win this game, you go into your bye week and you get Michigan State at home. You go on the road to Maryland, on the road to Minnesota Northwestern at home. Those are all games that I would have Nebraska significantly favored in. You win this game, there's a good chance we're talking about an undefeated Nebraska team in the middle of October. But again, it starts at home against Michigan. Fired up to get into this one. Want to talk about what does Nebraska need to do to get the job done at home? Before we get into it, as always, the Nebraska fans appreciate you guys. And I think many of y'all know this. We started this podcast right around when Matt Rhule took the job in Lincoln. And we've talked a heck of a lot of Nebraska football over the last 2.5 years. And it feels like it's all leading up to this kind of football game. The amount of support this fan base has shown the boys has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, and many of y'all know I'm a Michigan fan, I would love to hear just a vibe check from the Nebraska fans in the comment section. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into it. And I think that the biggest key here is this is the kind of football game where you brought Dylan in to elevate this team, to go out and win football games on the back of your quarterback. And I think Dan has done a really good job allowing Dylan to get into a rhythm as a thrower of the football. There's been a lot of easy throws, and Dylan's been getting the ball out on quick. Dan is doing a really good job giving Dylan some easy answers. This is one of those football games where I think not to say Nebraska has had the training wheels on this offense, but this is where you let Dylan really push it down the field. Because you look at most of this Nebraska passing attack up until this point, it's been a lot of quick game. It's been a lot of rhythmic throws. You don't go away from that when you play Michigan. This is the kind of game where I think you need to let Dylan push it. And look, go back to this kid at the high school ranks. Go back to what we've seen to start 2025. When Dylan wants to push the ball down the field, there are not many quarterbacks that do it better. The thing is, they just haven't really asked Dylan to do that a ton so far in 2025. In this football game, this is the game you brought Dylan in for. Let him push the ball down the field because you know he's got the guys on the outside. There's a very real chance that Michigan is going to be starting a true freshman boundary cornerback in this one. Now, I think the kid's good in Jaden Sanders, but he's still a true freshman. Like dealing with Dan Key vertically down the field, that's a matchup that if you're Nebraska, I think you'll like a lot. And getting into these pass catches for Nebraska, I think they've done a tremendous job building around Dylan, especially in the pass catcher room. Because I look at your top three wide receivers, Dane Key on the outside, Ja'Cory Barney working from the slot, and Isaiah Hunter, and say all three of those wide receivers are really good, but they excel at different things. You know, Dane Key, there ain't many wide receivers better stretching the field vertically, the exact kind of weapon Dylan needs. And then you have a guy that's working vertically down the field. Well, that creates a lot of space for a guy like Ja'Cory Barney, and I think they've been money getting Ja'Cory Barney in space. There are not many pass catchers who are more dynamic with the football in space than Ja'Cory Barney. And look, go back to that film with Michigan on the road against Oklahoma. Oklahoma did a really good job with some of that quick game, getting the ball out to their playmakers in space. They had guys that made Michigan miss. You're leaning on Ja'Cory Barney to be a guy that can make some Michigan defenders miss in this one as well. You sprinkle in Emmett Johnson out of the backfield. You sprinkle in what I think the tight end play I think has been damn solid for Nebraska so far in 2025. You've got a lot of different pass catchers that allow you to test and stress a defense in a lot of different ways. And then here's the last one that I think on offense is really big. finding some sort of balance. And what I mean by balance is, more importantly, staying on schedule. Whether that's running the football, whether that's the quick game, how often can you be ahead of the chains? Because when you're behind the chains against this Michigan defense, that's when the problems start to creep in. Wink Martindale is very, very good at dialing it up and kind of getting some pressure on those third and obvious passing situations. And you look at Nebraska and say, I love the inside of that offensive line. Justin Evans at center. Rocco's been nails for Nebraska so far. Henry's been very solid. I think you like your matchup on the inside. I think you're probably still a little bit worried about these tackles going up against some Michigan edge rushers that are NFL caliber dudes. Talking about Derek Moore, talking about seeing a guy like Jay Sean Barmer, a guy like TJ Guy. What you want to avoid here is being in those 3rd and 8 situations where Derek Moore can pin his ears back and get after Dylan. The better you can stay on schedule, whether that's running the football, whether that's the quick game, I think the better chance you have to be moving the football on this Michigan defense. Those are the things I'm looking for on the offense side of the football. And going to the defense here, I think it starts with stopping the run. And this is the biggest concern, I think, for a lot of Nebraska fans, right? If you followed this program closely, you're looking at the interior of that defensive line. You're looking at what you saw from that game against Cincinnati week 1 and saying, just how good is this defensive line, specifically when it comes to stopping the run? That's probably what you're looking at. Because you look at Michigan and say, what are they going to try to do with Bryce Underwood and Justice Haynes in the backfield? They're going to try to go on the road, settle Bryce Underwood in. The best way to do that is running the football. How much better is Nebraska at stopping the run from what we saw a couple of weeks ago against Cincinnati? That's the biggest storyline for Nebraska's defense. And this is what I'll say is, hey, I think you can trust your secondary on islands. One of the biggest flaws that I think you have for Michigan is, yes, Bryce Underwood is a very, very gifted quarterback. We're still not sure how good the wide receivers are on the outside. Last time Michigan went on the road and played a quality defense in Oklahoma, that's what Oklahoma did. They said, hey, we're going to walk up our safeties. We're going to put hats in the box, try to take away the run game and say, hey, Bryce Underwood on the road, can you make it happen down the field with these kind of pass catchers? Because I look at Nebraska safeties and say, hey, I'm walking them into the box all day. And Deshaun Singleton, a guy like Rex, are really, really good at fitting the run. You might have concerns about your defensive line holding up in this one. Know how you can neutralize that? You walk your safeties in the box and just throw numbers at the box. Throw numbers to stop the run game. Now, you can only do that if you have a lot of confidence in your boundary cornerbacks to hold up on islands, and I think Nebraska should in this football game. That's another matchup, is if Nebraska goes and says, hey, we're going to try to stop the run. Can Sayer Wright, can Andrew Marshall win their one-on-one matchups against Michigan wide receivers that we're just not sure how good they're going to be yet? Is probably another storyline you're watching for. I think at the end of the day, this is a game where it's going to be close, right? We can talk the X's and O's all we want. This game is, I have a feeling, is going to be close. Vegas is telling us a 2.5-point spread. Can you go out and make the plays in the third quarter and the fourth quarter to get you over the hump and win this game? That's probably what you're looking at, right? And this is the game where you look at your quarterback and saying that this could be a theme for Nebraska all year long, is we think we have the quarterback that can make it happen in these moments. Nebraska has not really been able to say that all that often in the last decade. Our quarterback versus your quarterback, fourth quarter, who's going to go out and score the last touchdown? I think if you're a Nebraska fan, this ain't no shot at Bryce Underwood. I love Bryce Underwood. But I think if you're a Nebraska fan, you got a lot of confidence in your year 2 quarterback to go out and make things happen in the third and fourth quarter. And I think it's going to come down to a couple explosives. Can Dylan make those throws? Can guys like Dan Key go up and make plays? Going to be a really fun one. Those are some of the keys that if I'm Nebraska, if we can take away the run game, force Bryce Underwood to win this through the air, that is probably the matchup that's the kind of game that you feel most comfortable playing. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.